On the morning of October 10th, 1963, the Vajont Dam stood almost perfectly intact. Not a crack in the concrete, not a breach in the arch, and yet, in the valley below, nearly 2,000 people were dead. No collapse, no structural failure. A wave had overtopped the crest by more than 200 meters and erased entire towns in under 4 minutes. The dam held. So if the structure was perfect, what killed nearly 2,000 people, and why had someone already predicted exactly how it would happen? Morning revealed a gray desert of mud and rock where the town of Longarone had been. Rescue workers arriving at the valley floor found nothing left to salvage, only a silence broken by the sound of flowing water. But looking up into the narrow gorge, the physical source of the tragedy remained. The Vajont Dam stood tall, its pale concrete arch curving between the limestone cliffs. It was entirely undamaged. This survival defied the basic rules of engineering failures. Normally, when a reservoir destroys a valley, the barrier has ruptured. Here, the double-curvature arch had faced a force far exceeding its design limits and held. The structure remained a masterpiece of modern construction, yet it stood over a graveyard. The intact wall leaves a chilling reality, one that forces us to look past the concrete for answers. The disaster was not a failure of concrete and steel. It was something far harder to see and far harder to forgive. Because the dam survived, the source of the catastrophe lay elsewhere, in the very bones of the mountain and in the calculations of the engineers who believed they could master it. The mountain rising directly above the southern bank of the reservoir was known to locals as Monte Toc. In the regional dialect, Toc meant crazy or rotten. For generations, the villagers of the valley had observed its steep limestone slopes with deep suspicion, calling it the mountain that walks. This was not folklore, but an observation of a geological reality. The northern flank of Monte Toc was prone to a slow, continuous creep, where soil and fractured rock shifted inches at a time, silent and barely noticeable. Yet history also recorded that these quiet movements could suddenly accelerate into violent, massive surges, sending vast chunks of the mountain crashing into the gorge below. To the engineers of the Società Adriatica di Elettricità, or SADE, the instability of Monte Toc was secondary to a spectacular economic opportunity. The Vajont River had carved a deep, narrow canyon through the hard limestone, a geological formation that seemed perfectly designed for a hydroelectric reservoir. By choosing this narrow gorge, SADE could construct a tall dam using a fraction of the concrete and materials a wider valley would require. The natural shape of the canyon allowed a smaller structure to hold back an immense volume of water, dramatically lowering construction costs while maximizing potential energy storage. This financial efficiency drove the decision to build. The design team focused on the strength of the canyon walls at the immediate site of the concrete arch, operating on the assumption that the reservoir could be safely contained within the steep valley. But in prioritizing the cost-saving geometry of the gorge, the planners relocated the primary danger from the valley floor to the slope directly above. They were placing millions of tons of water at the foot of an unstable, creeping giant. The designers built the Vajont Dam as a masterpiece of modern construction, selecting a double-curvature shell arch design. Unlike traditional gravity dams that rely on sheer mass to hold back water, this thin concrete barrier curved both horizontally and vertically. This geometry transferred the immense pressure of the reservoir directly into the solid limestone canyon walls, allowing the structure to remain incredibly slender. At its base, the wall measured just 22 meters thick, tapering to a mere 3.4 meters at the crest. As construction progressed, SADE's ambitions grew. The planned height of the dam escalated from an initial 150 meters to 200, and finally to a towering 262 meters. When workers poured the final cubic meter of concrete in 1959, Vajont was the tallest double-curvature arch dam on Earth. It was built to impound 168 million cubic meters of water, feeding an underground power station designed to generate 200 megawatts of electricity for Italy's rapidly growing post-war economy. This slender, elegant form represented the absolute peak of contemporary engineering confidence. It was an incredibly efficient use of materials, designed to withstand immense static water pressure from a calm reservoir. But this very efficiency made the dam vulnerable to dynamic forces. The thin concrete shell was calculated to hold water, not to resist a sudden, massive displacement wave. In February 1960, SAID began filling the reservoir, letting the water climb slowly up the face of the concrete barrier. By early summer, the water reached roughly 170 meters deep. As the reservoir rose, the ground responded. A 2-kilometer crack opened across the northern slope of Monte Toc, cutting a visible seam through the soil and stone. This was not a silent shift. SAID's newly installed monitoring network of geodetic stations recorded immediate physical movement. The instruments showed that a massive block of the mountain face was sliding downward at a rate of 3.5 centimeters every single day. The data provided a direct objective measurement of a mountain in motion. Long before the public understood the danger, the instruments on Monte Toc were recording a clear physical reaction to the weight of the rising reservoir. The mountain was shifting, responding directly to the water pressure building within its limestone layers. SAID engineers watched the meters climb, tracking a sliding landmass that had already begun its descent. The movement on the slopes of Monte Toc was not a random surface shifting, but the activation of a colossal geological trap. Deep beneath the heavy layer of marly limestone lay the mountain's structural flaw, a remarkably thin, continuous bed of clay belonging to the Fonsasso Formation. This hidden inner layer measured only 5 to 10 centimeters thick, yet it stretched across the entire slope. Composed of K-bentonite, rich in illite and smectite, this clay possessed a dangerous characteristic. It had incredibly low shear strength and became unstable when wet. Above this clay seam, the mountain's limestone was heavily fractured. As the reservoir filled, water did not merely press against the face of the dam, it seeped deep into these geological fissures, percolating downward toward the clay layer. The trapped water generated high pore pressure, pushing against the rock from within and reducing the effective normal stress holding the massive slope in place. Between 1960 and 1963, this underground system was repeatedly overwhelmed by heavy seasonal rainfall. The rainwater joined the rising reservoir water, compounding the internal hydraulic pressure. The saturated clay layer was turning into a highly lubricated, ready-made slip surface directly beneath millions of tons of solid rock. To the eye, Monte Toc still appeared as a solid, permanent massif. In reality, the entire northern flank of the mountain was now resting on a slick, unstable foundation, waiting for the final trigger to break its remaining grip. On November 4th, 1960, the mountain gave way. The reservoir had been filled to a depth of roughly 180 meters when a massive block of the northern slope detached. Over the course of 10 minutes, about 700,000 cubic meters of rock and soil slid directly into the reservoir. The resulting wave washed up the opposite banks, but the thin concrete barrier survived the impact. The displaced water was absorbed without overtopping the crest, leaving the valley below completely untouched. Because there were no casualties and no structural damage to the dam, SAID officials viewed the event as a success rather than a failure. Following the sudden collapse, the rapid movement of the mountain ground to a near halt, slowing to just 1 millimeter per day. But this quiet period did not trigger alarm. Instead of recognizing the slide as an unmistakable warning of a larger instability, project management treated the slowdown as reassurance. They chose to believe the slope had stabilized itself, interpreting the temporary lull as proof that the mountain could be controlled. This miscalculation encouraged them to proceed with the project, keeping the reservoir active and preparing for even higher water levels. On July 12, 1962, a formal engineering report stripped the project of any future defense. This technical memorandum detailed exactly what would happen if SAID continued to raise the reservoir. It warned that a fast-moving landslide plunging into the full basin would generate a colossal displacement wave. The calculations showed that while the concrete arch itself was strong enough to survive the impact, the resulting wave would overtop the crest. Millions of tons of water would surge over the barrier, hurtling down the narrow gorge to destroy the villages below. Despite these explicit warnings, SAID executives and government regulators did not pause. Just 3 days later, the Ministry of Public Works approved the request to raise the water level to 620 meters above sea level, adding 30 million cubic meters of water to the basin. From this moment on, the danger was no longer a theoretical risk or an unpredictable act of nature. The hazard was a documented certainty, signed, dated, and filed away while the filling of the reservoir continued. Seyday's operational strategy relied on a dangerous assumption that the landslide could be throttled like an engine. Engineers constructed drainage tunnels to adjust the reservoir, believing that they could control the mountain's pace by manipulating the water level. In early October 1961, when the slope shifted at 8 centimeters per day, management ordered an immediate drawdown. As the water fell, monitoring instruments registered a dramatic slowdown, dropping to mere millimeters per day. This responsive behavior convinced the engineering team that they held absolute dominion over the slide. To test this theory, they initiated a second filling cycle in October 1961, raising the water toward 235 meters. The mountain responded instantly, accelerating back to 1.2 centimeters of movement per day. Rather than halting the project, this precise reaction solidified their false confidence. The operators believed they had mapped the exact physics of the slope, treating a volatile geological mass as a predictable hydraulic valve that could be balanced indefinitely. On October 9, 1963, the geodetic instruments on Monte Toc registered a terminal spike, showing the northern slope sliding at 20 centimeters per day. The mountain was accelerating beyond any rate previously recorded. At 10:38 p.m., the slope failed completely. A colossal mass of rock and forest, measured at approximately 260 million cubic meters, detached from the mountain flank as a single coherent block. This was not a gradual collapse. The enormous landmass accelerated down the steep slope, reaching speeds of over 90 kilometers per hour. Within just 45 seconds, the entire block crashed into the reservoir floor, instantly burying the southern basin under hundreds of feet of debris. The violent impact displaced roughly 50 million cubic meters of water. Confined within the narrow limestone gorge, the liquid column had nowhere to expand but upward. A colossal wave rose into the night, overtopping the crest of the dam by approximately 245 meters. The kinetic energy of the landslide was so immense that it sent shockwaves through the Earth's crust, registering on sensitive seismographs as far away as Vienna and Brussels. As the water surged over the concrete lip, the thin double-curvature arch faced a dynamic hydraulic load far exceeding any planned stress limits. Yet the geometry of the structure held, deflecting the vast compression forces into the canyon bedrock. The dam survived entirely undamaged, locked in place as the wave it could not contain screamed into the darkened valley below. The wall of water surged down the narrow limestone gorge, reaching the valley floor and the town of Longarone in just 4 minutes. In the local bars, residents had gathered on this quiet Wednesday night to watch a football match on television. The first sign of the impending catastrophe was a sudden, total power failure that plunged the entire valley into pitch darkness. Seconds later, a violent, crushing wall of wind and blinding rock mist pushed ahead of the advancing flood, shattered windows and tore roofs from houses. Then came the water. A 50 million cubic meter wave of mud and debris slammed into the valley floor, instantly pulverizing the towns of Longarone, Parago, Villanova, Rivalta, and Fay. Nearly 2,000 people were killed in their sleep or swept away in the dark. By morning, nothing remained of these historic alpine communities but a gray desert of stones and silent mud. Today, the Vajont Dam stands entirely intact, operating as a quiet tourist site where visitors walk across the concrete crest road. Yet its physical survival serves as the ultimate indictment of its creators. The disaster was a fully foreseen, preventable tragedy driven by institutional arrogance. Seyday's leadership chose to prioritize a prestigious engineering project over the repeated, frantic warnings of a moving mountain and the safety of the families living in its shadow. The silent arch of Vajont still stands as a monument to human arrogance. It proves that technical genius is worthless when divorced from human ethics. As modern engineering pushes deeper into unstable environments, the lesson remains critical. When project ambition eclipses public safety, disaster is never a natural accident. It is a choice. If you found this perspective important, please subscribe for more.